Hello guys, I have a different type of video for you today. In this one, we're going to do a bunch of Stamblade passes on a 6 million dummy with different amounts of champion points. In the background now is a 300 CP pass, and later on you can compare that with an 810 CP one. It's a popular question for a new player to ask about because they watch videos about builds and rotations from all these max CP players, but they have absolutely no way of competing with that, and they aren't really sure what numbers they should be aiming for. This video should at least give you a general idea of how much of a difference champion points actually make. So first of all, I chose Stamblade as the class because it currently has the highest self-buff DPS of any class, and it also has the most useful self-provided buffs and debuffs. What that means is that the variance between DPS at different CP levels is at its highest on a Stamblade. If you're playing something different or a Magicka class, the difference between DPS at different CP levels will be smaller. After that, I went on and passed for 3 hours. I did 5 passes at 300 CP, 5 passes at 500 CP, 5 at 700, and then 5 at 810. I took an average of the DPS each time. I only used passes that had a light attack per second ratio of between 0.88 and 0.91, and I made sure that every pass had exactly 1 heavy attack, since the passes with low CP required 1 heavy in order to sustain. Every pass also had the same average penetration value, since I kept the number of points into the piercing tree static with 60 points. I was using a bit of an off-meta weird setup because Reliquien would actually make the gap artificially smaller by having more time at higher stacks in the low DPS passes. So as you can see, I have Veladreth, Briarheart and War Machine, with War Machine on the front bar and a VMA bow on the back bar. VMA bow is totally achievable at 300 CP, but I understand not everyone at that level will have it. Just subtract about 2k DPS if you don't have a VMA bow. The rotation in each pass was, for the most part, exactly the same, but due to the different levels of DPS, there were some different timings for entering the execute phase, for example. Sometimes I would enter the execute phase with an in-cap ready, other times I would not. That's just a limitation we can't work around unless we ignore execute DPS entirely. So what do the results say? You can see the 4 data points that I gathered in the graph here, and you can immediately notice that the first bunch of champion points make a much bigger difference than the last few. The difference between 300 and 500 CP was an increase of 12.9% DPS. 500 to 700 was a compound increase of 8.7% DPS, and then the last 110 champion points were a further 2.8% on top of that. The overall DPS increase from 300 to 810 CP was 26.2%. So, we can all agree that is a fairly substantial number. But hopefully it should also be clear that CP is not the absolute biggest factor in determining what DPS numbers you can pull in ESO. If you're starting off at 300 CP with 20k DPS, gaining an extra 26% is only going to put you at 25k, nowhere even close to the theoretical maximum. Rotation and the speed at which you can successfully weave light attacks is by far and wide the biggest influencer here. So, in summary, yeah, you won't be able to pull the same numbers as the max CP players, but starting to practice your rotation before you get to the max CP milestone is definitely not a waste of time. I hope you can use the results in this video to work out roughly how much DPS you should be getting by comparing the percentages with the best passes available for your class as a sort of approximation. Cheers guys, see ya.